The moment I signed those closing papers, I knew I had made either the best or worst decision of my life. The house was absolutely perfect in every way I could imagine. The price was unbelievably low for the neighborhood. But the homeowners association, that was a completely different story, and I was about to discover exactly why. My name is Marcus Webb, and I am a 32-year-old software engineer who just bought his first home in Riverside Meadows, a community that had made the local news at least 17 times in the past 3 years alone. When my realtor Jennifer Martinez first showed me the beautiful 3-bedroom craftsman-style house with its charming wraparound porch and mature oak trees shading the front yard, I fell completely in love with the property. The asking price was $175,000, which was at least $50,000 below the actual market value for comparable homes in this desirable area. There is something important you should know before we move forward, Jennifer had said nervously, clutching her tablet. This HOA has quite a reputation, actually, several reputations, and none of them are good. I should have listened carefully to that warning. Instead, I found myself distracted by the gorgeous granite countertops, the finished basement with built-in shelving, and the massive backyard perfect for summer barbecues. The price seemed too good to be true, but I convinced myself that HOA drama was probably just overblown neighborhood gossip. The trouble began on moving day, a Saturday morning in late March of 2024. I was directing the movers when a silver Mercedes-Benz pulled up behind the truck, partially blocking the street. Out stepped a woman in her mid-50s, wearing an expensive cream-colored pantsuit. She wore oversized sunglasses despite the cloudy weather, and her blonde hair was cut in a severe bob. Her smile looked as fake as the designer handbag on her arm. "You must be the new owner of this particular property," she said in a voice that was absolutely dripping with false sweetness, mixed with barely concealed judgment. "My name is Karen Blackwood, and I currently serve as the elected treasurer of the Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association. I wanted to personally welcome you to our community and make sure you understand our standards." Before I could respond, another car pulled up behind the Mercedes, a modest Honda Accord. A warm woman in her early 60s emerged, dressed in jeans and sneakers, with a genuinely kind smile. She had short gray hair, and her demeanor radiated approachability. Her eyes crinkled warmly when she smiled. "Please do not let Karen intimidate you right here on your very first day," the second woman said warmly and sincerely, extending her hand toward me for a proper handshake. "My name is Barbara Chun, and I serve as the current president of the Riverside Meadows HOA board. I am actually here to genuinely welcome you to our neighborhood, not to conduct some kind of property inspection or issue warnings before you have even unpacked your first box." Karen's artificially pleasant smile tightened visibly and noticeably, and I could clearly see her jaw muscles clench beneath her carefully applied makeup. "Barbara." I was simply introducing myself to our newest community resident and politely reminding him about our well-established community standards and written regulations. There is absolutely nothing wrong with doing that on moving day. "Community standards? Certainly, yes," Barbara responded with a slight but obvious eye roll, and a tone that strongly suggested this was a very familiar and ongoing argument between these two women. However, we are talking about actual community standards, not Karen's extensive collection of personal preferences, or the many made-up rules that she created and that are not actually written anywhere in our official governing documents. Marcus, correct? If you need any kind of assistance or have questions, my personal phone number is included in the official welcome packet that our HOA secretary will be mailing out to you within the next few days. I am referring to the real, legitimate, board-approved welcome packet, not whatever thick collection of rules and implied threats that Karen is currently preparing to hand to you. Karen's face quickly flushed a noticeable deep red color, and I could observe her hands beginning to tremble slightly with what appeared to be barely suppressed anger and frustration. She reached aggressively into her expensive luxury handbag and pulled out an extremely thick manila folder that looked like it must have contained at least 100 pages or more of various printed documents and highlighted rules. "These are the complete official rules and regulations that govern this entire community," she stated sharply. thrusting the heavy folder toward me with such force that I actually had to take an instinctive step backward to avoid being hit. I have personally taken considerable time to highlight all of the most frequently violated community policies using a yellow marker for easy reference. Just in the past 6 months alone, we have documented and recorded exactly 47 separate rule violations within this community, and a significant number of those violations occurred right here on this particular street. 47 alleged violations that you personally reported to the board. Karen, Barbara quickly corrected in a firm but still somehow friendly tone. And I really should mention to Marcus that the vast majority of those supposed violations were thoroughly and carefully reviewed by the full board during our monthly meetings, and most of them were ultimately and officially dismissed as completely frivolous. Complaints that did not actually represent violations of any rules that are written in our governing documents. I stood there extremely awkwardly, still tightly holding a cardboard moving box that was clearly labeled kitchen stuff in thick black marker, watching these two strong-willed women face off intensely against each other right there in my residential driveway on what was supposed to be an exciting and happy day in my life. The professional moving crew had completely stopped their work at this point, obviously entertained by the unexpected neighborhood drama that was unfolding directly before their eyes. I noticed that one of the moving guys was actually leaning casually back against the large truck, with his arms crossed comfortably, watching the confrontation as if it were his absolute favorite television show or entertaining movie. Karen straightened her shoulders dramatically and lifted her chin high in what seemed like a well-practiced and frequently rehearsed gesture of authority. I take my elected position as community treasurer extremely seriously, which is apparently unlike some other people on this board. Unlike certain other people, I genuinely understand that maintaining and protecting property values throughout this neighborhood depends entirely upon maintaining strict standards and consistently enforcing all of our established rules fairly and equally for everyone. Property values certainly depend on people actually wanting to live in this community, Barbara countered smoothly and calmly, crossing both arms firmly across her chest. And attracting and retaining residents becomes extremely difficult and nearly impossible when those residents are being constantly harassed and bothered over completely ridiculous things like specific mailbox colors and exact grass height measurements that Karen personally measures using a special ruler that she apparently keeps stored in her car at all times. Those particular rules exist for very good and important reasons. Karen's voice was clearly rising now in both volume and pitch, and I quickly noticed several curious neighbors beginning to peek out cautiously from behind their window curtains and front doors to observe what was happening. Some rules definitely exist for legitimately good reasons. I absolutely agree, Barbara responded calmly and reasonably, but having 23 complete pages of highly detailed regulations, specifically about what exact colors and specific patterns are considered acceptable for residential window treatments, that particular requirement is excessive, unreasonable, and frankly ridiculous, Karen, and you know that perfectly well. The original governing documents that were written when this community was first established only state that window treatments should be reasonably maintained in good and decent condition. Karen deliberately turned her full attention back toward me, completely and obviously ignoring Barbara as if the HOA president had suddenly ceased to exist in her world. Mr. Webb, I will personally be conducting a thorough and comprehensive official inspection of your entire property next week, specifically on Wednesday morning at exactly 10 o'clock. Please make absolutely certain that your trash and recycling cans are never visible from the street at any time except during actual scheduled trash collection days, that your front lawn grass is carefully maintained at exactly 2.5 inches in precise height, and that your mailbox color matches perfectly with the approved community color palette, which you will find documented on page 7 of the folder I have just given you. The previous owner of this house, a man named Tom Patterson, was extremely and consistently negligent about properly following community rules, which is precisely and specifically why the final selling price ended up being so unusually and suspiciously low. The actual price was low because you personally scared away at least 3 other serious and qualified buyers through your constant harassment and completely unreasonable demands. Barbara stated firmly and directly, her previously friendly demeanor now clearly showing definite steel underneath. Marcus, I want you to fully understand that you are absolutely not required by any written rule or official regulation to allow Karen or any other person onto your private property for any kind of so-called inspection, unless there happens to be a genuine emergency situation or legitimate safety concern. As the properly elected president of this homeowners association, I am the only board member who is officially authorized to conduct any kind of compliance reviews, and my standard policy is to always give new residents a minimum of 30 complete days to settle in comfortably and get organized before I would even begin to think about conducting any type of property review. Karen's face rapidly went from being flushed red to nearly dark purple in color, and I could observe small beads of perspiration beginning to form and appear on her forehead despite the relatively cool spring weather conditions. We will just have to see what the rest of the elected board members have to say about your extremely lenient and overly approach to community governance, Barbara. Some of us in this neighborhood actually remember clearly when this community genuinely had real standards and when people actually took considerable pride in properly maintaining their properties. Some of us also remember very clearly when this community was absolutely drowning in expensive lawsuits. Barbara shot back with surprising intensity and obvious passion. 3 completely separate lawsuits, in actual fact, and all 3 of them were filed by frustrated residents who were being systematically harassed through excessive and unreasonable enforcement tactics. 2 of those 3 lawsuits were eventually settled for quite significant amounts of money that came directly from our shared HOA reserve funds, which affected everyone. That is precisely why I was elected president last year. Karen, the homeowners throughout this community clearly wanted real change and reasonable leadership. This situation was absolutely fascinating and terrifying in completely equal measure. I had definitely heard, through various real estate contacts and local gossip, that this particular HOA was considered controversial, but I had rather naively imagined that meant boring disputes about approved exterior paint colors or appropriate seasonal decoration display. This felt intensely personal and genuinely hostile, exactly like I had somehow accidentally moved myself directly into the middle of an active war zone. Karen pointed one perfectly manicured finger directly and aggressively at Barbara's face. You will definitely not be president forever, Barbara. Official HOA elections are coming up in exactly 6 months from now, and I currently have strong support from several long-term residents who are completely tired of your permissive attitude. Long-term residents like yourself. You mean? Barbara's smile contained pure steel. We will let the homeowners decide. In the meantime, Marcus is protected. No harassment allowed. Karen marched to her Mercedes. Enjoy your home, Mr. Webb. We will be seeing each other very soon. It was clearly a threat. As Karen drove away, Barbara relaxed. I apologize for that scene. Karen was treasurer under the previous administration, which ran this HOA like a dictatorship for 8 years. When I was elected last November, she lost power. What kind of dictatorship? I asked. The kind where people got fined $200 for leaving garage doors open more than 10 minutes, where meetings were secret, where Karen and the old president collected $120,000 in fines that supposedly paid for improvements that never happened. That sounds illegal. That is why I ran. That is why Karen sees you as an opportunity. This property was a battleground. The previous owner fought Karen constantly. She issued violations every single week about everything. He finally sold at a loss. So she will target me, probably. But I am president now, and I read the governing documents. Most of Karen's rules do not actually exist in writing. She made them up. And she is furious. I refuse to enforce them. What should I do? Barbara handed me her card. Document everything. If Karen trespasses, take photos. Send me any violation notices. Come to the meeting on the first Thursday in April. We are voting on amendments to stop board overreach. Will Karen be there? She never misses meetings. She is trying to remove me. She has 4 supporters out of 87 homeowners. Why so few? Because people remember the fines, the harassment, the feeling you did not own your home. Barbara smiled. This is a good community. We just had bad leadership. E.M. Fitzit. But people like Karen fight change. A mover called out. Barbara left. Welcome to Riverside Meadows. Do not let Karen intimidate you. I looked at my house, wondering what I had done. The price had been too good. Now I knew why. Inside, unpacking, I could not forget Karen's cold smile and threatening voice. I had bought into a war. That evening, assembling furniture, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Webb, Karen Blackwood. Her voice was soft now, almost kind, but wrong. Like a snake. I wanted to apologize for earlier. I am passionate about our reputation. No problem. I was thinking I could visit tomorrow. Help you meet neighbors. Barbara means well, but I have lived here 16 years. I am busy unpacking. Long pause. Of course. But close your garage door by nightfall. Safety issue. We would hate for anything to happen to your belongings. She hung up. I walked to the window. 3 houses down. Karen stood by her Mercedes, phone out, staring at my house. She waved slowly. I stepped back, heart racing. This was not just controversial. This was dangerous. Closing my garage door carefully, I realized the war was not over. It was just beginning. What do you think happens next? Comment your predictions. Share your HOA nightmare stories. The first violation notice appeared exactly 3 days after I moved in. I found it Wednesday morning, tucked under my windshield wiper like a parking ticket. The paper was official HOA letterhead, printed on expensive cardstock and covered in highlighted sections. Notice of violation. First warning, it read in bold red letters across the top. Below that, in smaller print, property address, 123 Maple Drive. Violation. Trash receptacles visible from street during non-collection hours. Fine. $50 if not corrected within 72 hours. Reported by K. Blackwood, HOA Treasurer. I stared at the notice in disbelief. My trash cans were tucked against the side of my garage, barely visible unless you were specifically looking for them. I immediately pulled out my phone and took several photos from different angles of the street, documenting that the cans were hardly noticeable at all. Then I texted Barbara. Got my first violation notice. Trash cans. Day 3 of living here. Her response came within 2 minutes. Do not pay that fine. Tag photos. I need to see the notice. Can you bring it to my house this afternoon? Barbara lived 4 streets over in a modest 2-story colonial. When she opened the door, she was holding a coffee mug that said World's Okayest HOA President and wearing reading glasses perched on her nose. Come in, she said warmly, gesturing me inside. Her living room was cozy, filled with family photos and bookshelves. Let me see what Karen sent you this time. I handed her the violation notice. Barbara read it carefully, her expression growing darker with each line. Finally, she looked up at me and sighed deeply. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Karen is testing you, Marcus. She wants to see if you will just pay the fine without questioning it, like Tom did for the first 2 years before he finally started fighting back. But my trash cans are barely visible, I protested. I took photos. I know that is the whole point. The actual rule states that trash receptacles should not be stored in front yards or prominently visible from the street. Your cans are on the side of your garage. Technically, you are in complete compliance. Barbara pulled out her own phone and showed me a document. See, this is the actual CC and our language. But Karen has been telling people for years that trash cans cannot be visible at all, from any angle, ever. She made that up. So, what do I do? Barbara smiled. You are going to write a formal response to the board, which I will read at the next meeting. You're going to cite the exact language in the governing documents, include your photos as evidence, and request that this frivolous violation be dismissed. And it will be dismissed because I have 3 other board members who are tired of Karen's nonsense. Over the next week, things escalated quickly. On Friday, another notice appeared, this time claiming my lawn was uneven in height and exceeding community standards. On Monday, a third notice cited me for non-approved decorative items because I had placed a simple welcome mat in front of my door. The mat was plain black. No design, no text, just black. Each time, I documented everything with photos and videos. I measured my lawn with a ruler I bought specifically for this purpose. It was exactly 2.5 inches, the supposed requirement. I photographed my welcome mat from multiple angles. I sent everything to Barbara. She is trying to break you early, Barbara explained during one of our now frequent phone calls. This is her pattern. Overwhelm new residents with violations in the first month, make them feel like they cannot do anything right. Most people either pay the fines to make it stop, or they give up and move away. Tom Patterson received 23 violation notices in his first 2 months. 23. I was stunned. Karen was worse back then because Donald, the old president, supported her completely. They worked as a team. Now she is on her own, but she is desperate to maintain her power. The election is in 6 months, and if I win again, she knows I am going to push for her removal as treasurer. On Thursday afternoon, I was working from home when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Karen standing on my porch, wearing another expensive pantsuit, this time in pale blue. She held a leather portfolio and wore that same fake smile from moving day. Good afternoon, Mr. Webb. I hope I am not interrupting your day. I wanted to discuss your recent violation notices in person. I remembered Barbara's advice. Document everything. I pulled out my phone and hit record. I am recording this conversation, Karen. I hope that is okay. Her smile faltered for just a second, but she recovered quickly. Of course. Transparency is important. I simply wanted to explain that these violations are accumulating, and the fines can become quite substantial. Currently, you owe the HOA $150 for 3 separate violations. If these are not paid within the next 48 hours, they will increase to $300 total. I am not paying fines for violations that are not actually violations, I said firmly. I have reviewed the actual governing documents, and I am in compliance with every single rule. Karen's expression hardened. Mr. Webb, I have been treasurer of this HOA for 12 years. I know these rules better than anyone. If I say you are in violation, then you are in violation. But Barbara says, Barbara, Karen interrupted sharply, is new to this position and does not understand how we have always operated. She is making changes that are destroying the standards we worked so hard to build. If you align yourself with her permissive approach, you will regret it. Is that a threat? Karen's smile returned, but it was cold now. Not a threat, Mr. Webb. Simply a warning from someone who has been in this community much longer than you or Barbara. Good afternoon. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on my walkway. I watched her get into a Mercedes and sit there for a moment, talking on her phone while staring at my house. I kept recording until she finally drove away. That evening, I attended my first HOA board meeting. It was held in the community center, a small building near the neighborhood entrance. When I arrived 15 minutes early, the parking lot was already half full. Inside, about 30 residents were seated in folding chairs facing a long table where the board members would sit. I recognized several faces from my street. A man in his 40s approached me immediately. You must be the new guy. On Maple Drive. I am Robert Chun, Barbara's husband. She told me you have been getting the full Karen treatment. We shook hands. Robert had kind eyes behind his glasses and a firm handshake. Karen put Tom through hell. We were relieved when he finally moved. But we felt guilty too. We should have helped him more, but everyone was scared of Karen back then. Donald would retaliate against anyone who opposed them. What kind of retaliation? Selective enforcement. Suddenly, you would get violation notices for things nobody else got cited for. Your requests for architectural improvements would be denied. Your maintenance fees would mysteriously increase. It was systematic harassment designed to make people fall in line or leave. More residents arrived, filling the seats. I noticed they fell into two distinct groups. One cluster sat on the left side, older residents who looked stern and kept glancing disapprovingly at newcomers. The other group, much larger, sat on the right and in the back. Younger families and middle-aged couples who seemed more relaxed. At exactly 7 o'clock in the evening, Barbara entered the community center room with 4 other board members walking behind her in a line. She took the center seat at the long table as president, sitting up straight with confidence. To her right sat a friendly-looking woman in her 50s with glasses and a warm smile, the secretary, whose name was Michelle Torres. To Barbara's left sat 2 men who appeared to be in their 60s, the vice president named James Williams and a member-at-large named David Park, who always took careful notes. And on the far left side of the table, isolated physically and socially from the other board members, sat Karen. She arranged her expensive leather portfolio and papers with precise, controlled movements, her expression cold and professional. Barbara called the meeting to order with a firm knock of her gavel, and they systematically worked through standard community business, approving minutes from the previous month's meeting, discussing upcoming maintenance projects like repairing the community center roof, reviewing the quarterly budget reports. It was all rather boring routine business, until they finally reached the agenda item labeled New Business. We have received several formal requests to review recent violation notices, Barbara announced clearly, her voice carrying through the room. First, we have a detailed written response from Marcus Webb of 123 Mup Drive regarding 3 separate violations issued to him in his first week of residence in our community. Karen leaned forward immediately and aggressively. Madam President, I move that we table this entire discussion for next month's meeting. Mr. Webb has not paid any of his outstanding fines, so his complaints are not valid or worthy of board consideration until full payment is received. That is not how this works, Karen, and you know it. Barbara responded firmly and directly. Any resident has the absolute right to contest a violation regardless of their payment status. That is literally written in our bylaws. Section 12, Paragraph 4. Mr. Webb, would you like to address the board and explain your position? I stood up, my heart pounding. I had prepared a short statement, but suddenly 30 pairs of eyes were on me, including Karen's cold stare. Thank you, Madam President. I received 3 violation notices in my first week living here. The first claimed my trash cans were visible from the street, but photos showed they are tucked against my garage wall. The second claimed my lawn exceeded height standards, but measurements show it is exactly 2.5 inches. The third cited my welcome mat as none approved, but there is no rule about welcome mats in the governing documents. I held up a folder. I have documentation for everything, including photos, measurements, and citations from the actual CC&RS. I believe these violations were issued inappropriately and should be dismissed. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several residents nodded in agreement. Karen stood abruptly. This is exactly the problem with our current leadership. New residents think they can ignore established community standards just because they found some technicality. We have maintained this neighborhood's property values for over 15 years by enforcing strict standards. If we start allowing trash cans to be visible and lawns to be overgrown and random decorations to appear on doorsteps, this entire community will decline. His lawn is not overgrown, Barbara interjected. It is literally the exact height specified, and his trash cans are barely visible, and there is no rule about welcome mats. There should be. Karen's voice rose. And there was before you started changing everything? The room suddenly erupted in multiple conversations happening simultaneously. Several older residents sitting on the left side of the room voiced immediate and vocal support for Karen, nodding their heads and saying things like, "She is right, and we need standards." But many more residents, significantly more, began speaking up loudly and emotionally, about their own personal experiences with frivolous and unfair violations over the years. A woman in her 30s with 2 young children sitting beside her stood up first, her voice shaking slightly but determined. Karen cited me last year for having a decorative wreath on my front door in August. She said seasonal decorations were only allowed to be displayed during December, but that rule does not exist anywhere in our documents. I paid a $75 fine because I was scared and worried there would be more harassment if I complained. An elderly man in the back raised his weathered hand high. She told me my mailbox was the wrong shade of black. Can you believe that? Drong savvy. She made me repaint it 3 separate times before she finally approved the color. The whole thing cost me over $200 in paint and labor. A middle-aged couple stood together. The husband spoke first. We got fined for parking our car in our own driveway because Karen said it was angled incorrectly. Angled incorrectly. In our own driveway. More and more stories poured out from frustrated residents who had been quietly suffering. Barbara let people speak freely, taking careful notes on her laptop. Karen's face grew progressively redder and more flushed with each personal testimony. Her jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. Finally, Barbara called for order. I move that we dismiss all 3 violations issued to Mr. Webb and refund any fines he may have paid. All in favor. 4 hands went up immediately. Barbara the secretary, the vice president, and the member at large. Karen's hands stayed down. Opposed, she stated coldly. The motion passes 4-1. Barbara announced, Mr. Webb, your violations are dismissed. Furthermore, I am proposing new guidelines for violation notices that require photos and specific rule citations. We will vote on that at next month's meeting. Karen gathered her papers with sharp, angry movements. This is not over, she said. Loud enough for everyone to hear. Elections are in 6 months. We will see who the homeowners really want leading this community. She stormed out, and the door slammed behind her. As the meeting continued, I felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. I had won this round, but Karen's threat echoed in my mind. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me to share their own Karen stories and offer support. Robert patted my shoulder. Welcome to the resistance, he joked, but his eyes were serious. I drove home feeling victorious but uneasy. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something on my porch. Another violation notice. This one was dated today during the meeting. Violation. Vehicle parked incorrectly in driveway, blocking sidewalk access. My car was parked perfectly in my driveway, nowhere near the sidewalk. I looked up and down the street. 3 houses down, Karen's Mercedes sat in her driveway. Her porch light was on, and I could see her silhouette in the window, watching. What happens when Karen realizes intimidation is not working? Drop your thoughts below. Have you ever stood up to an HOA bully? The morning after the board meeting, I woke up to find my front yard completely covered in small orange flags. There must have been at least 50 of them, maybe even 60 or more, each one carefully planted in the soil and marking a supposedly dead spot in my lawn. A printed notice was taped prominently to my front door with heavy-duty packing tape. Lawn maintenance violation, urgent attention required, it read in bold red letters across the top. Below that, in smaller but still alarming print, property requires immediate professional treatment for severe dying grass condition. Estimated cost $800 to $1,000 for lawn restoration services. Failure to address within 14 calendar days will result in HOA hiring contractor and charging homeowner full cost plus 25% administrative fees. I walked slowly around my yard in my pajamas and slippers, carefully examining each flag, while my neighbors watched curiously from their windows. My lawn was perfectly healthy and well-maintained. There were absolutely no dead spots anywhere. The grass was uniformly green, thick and lush, recently mowed to the proper height. This was completely and obviously fabricated, a blatant lie designed to harass me further. I took at least 30 detailed photos from multiple angles, making sure to capture timestamps and GPS coordinates on each image. Then I called Barbara immediately, not even caring that it was only 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning. "She is escalating," Barbara said grimly when she arrived 20 minutes later with her husband Robert. They both walked through my yard, examining the grass carefully. "This is a new level of harassment. She has never gone this far before." "What am I supposed to do?" I asked, feeling frustrated and exhausted. "I cannot keep fighting a new violation every single day." Robert knelt down and pulled up one of the orange flags, examining it closely. "These are landscaping survey flags. You can buy a box of 100 of them at any hardware store for about $12. Karen probably did this herself last night after the meeting. She came onto my property in the middle of the night. That would be trespassing," Barbara said firmly, "and we can use that. Marcus, I want you to check if you have any security camera footage. Even if you do not, we are going to install cameras today." This has gone too far. Over the next 2 hours, Robert helped me set up for security cameras covering my front yard, driveway, and both sides of my house. They were motion-activated and connected to my phone. Barbara drafted a formal complaint to the board about Karen's trespassing and false violation reports. The board meeting yesterday showed me something important. Barbara explained as we sat at my kitchen table reviewing documents. Most of the community is tired of Karen's tactics. We had maybe 5 people who supported her, but at least 25 who spoke up against her. That is why she is panicking. She knows she is losing control. So she is going to get worse before she gets better. Almost certainly. Karen has built her entire identity around being the enforcer of this community. When Donald was president, they ruled together. Now that she is isolated and losing power, she is desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Barbara was right about everything. Over the next week, things spiraled completely and utterly out of control in ways I could never have imagined. On Tuesday morning, I received a certified letter containing a violation for excessive noise disturbance because I had mowed my lawn at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a sunny weekday. The notice claimed that quiet hours were strictly enforced from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. on all weekdays to protect residents who work night shifts. I checked the governing documents thoroughly and carefully. There were absolutely no such quiet hours mentioned anywhere in any document. On Wednesday afternoon, Karen sent another formal letter via certified mail demanding I immediately remove my garden hose from the side of my house because all hoses, watering equipment, and lawn maintenance tools must be stored in enclosed containers or inside garages at all times when not in active use. I read through every single page of the CC&Rs twice. Again, no such rule existed anywhere. On Thursday morning, she cited me for having my bedroom curtains open past 10 p.m. at night, claiming it created light pollution and visual disturbance that bothered neighbors and violated community standards for nighttime property appearance. The accusation was completely absurd. My bedroom windows faced the backyard. There were no neighbors directly behind me, just a wooded conservation area that nobody owned. On Friday, I got another violation for improperly storing my vehicle because my car was parked in my driveway at an angle. Karen deemed unprofessional and visually disruptive to neighborhood aesthetics. Violation notice came with increasingly aggressive and threatening language and significantly higher fines attached. The amounts climbed quickly and dramatically. $75, $100, $150, $200. And the lawn violation had jumped to $300. If I had actually paid all of them like she demanded, I would have owed over $1,200 for completely fabricated violations that had no basis in any written rules. But I did not pay a single penny. Instead, I documented everything meticulously and forwarded it all to Barbara. And my new security cameras caught something very interesting. On Thursday night at 11:47 p.m., the motion sensors activated. I checked my phone and watched in real time as a figure in dark clothing approached my front yard carrying something. The person moved quickly to my flower bed and planted several dead plants among my healthy flowers, then hurried away. The video quality was excellent. Even in night vision mode, I could clearly see the person's face when they looked up briefly. It was Karen. I immediately called Barbara, walk-in air, up. I have video of Karen trespassing and sabotaging my property. "Send it to me right now," Barbara said, suddenly wide awake. This is exactly what we needed. The next morning, Friday, a new violation notice appeared. This one claimed my flower bed contains dying plants in violation of landscaping standards. Had Karen dead to rights? Barbara called an emergency board meeting for Saturday morning. She cited urgent matters requiring immediate board attention and made the meeting mandatory for all board members. Karen could not refuse without making herself look even worse. Saturday morning arrived, and I got to the community center 30 minutes early to set up my presentation equipment. I arrived to find it already packed with residents sitting in every available chair. Word had spread incredibly quickly throughout the neighborhood about the emergency meeting, and people were extremely curious about what evidence would be presented. Many residents I had never even met before came up to introduce themselves and share their own Karen horror stories while we waited. Robert had helped me prepare a comprehensive presentation the night before with printed photos in color, clear video stills, and a detailed timeline documenting every single violation Karen had issued to me, with dates and supposed rule citations. Karen arrived exactly 15 minutes late, walking in dramatically with her chin held high and her designer bag clutched tightly under her arm like armor. She looked genuinely tired and worn down. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Despite her makeup and her usually perfect hair seemed slightly disheveled and hastily arranged. She sat down at the board table without making eye contact with anyone. Barbara called the meeting to order promptly at 10 o'clock. "We are gathered here this morning to address a very serious pattern of harassment and possible criminal activity involving trespassing and property damage. Mr. Webb has collected and documented extensive evidence that a board member has been repeatedly trespassing on his property and systematically falsifying violation reports. Marcus, please come forward and present your evidence to the board and community." I stood up, my hands shaking slightly, and began my presentation. I showed photos of my healthy lawn next to the violation claiming dead spots. I showed pictures of my hose neatly coiled beside my garage next to the violation, demanding it be hidden. I showed screenshots of the governing documents proving the rules Karen cited did not exist. Then I played the security camera video. The room went completely silent as everyone watched Karen plant dead flowers in my garden bed at nearly midnight. The timestamp was clear. Her face was unmistakable. When the video ended, the silence stretched for several long seconds. Karen stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That video is fake. Anyone can manipulate digital footage these days. This is clearly a setup designed to discredit me because I refuse to lower our community standards. The video has metadata showing the date, time, and camera information," I responded calmly. "I am happy to have an independent expert verify its authenticity." "This is a witch hunt." Karen's voice rose sharply. "Ever since Barbara became president, she has been trying to push me out. She is using this new resident as a pawn in her political game. This entire situation is manufactured." Barbara remained calm. "Karen, we have multiple residents who have testified about similar harassment. We have documented violations that cite rules which do not exist in our governing documents. And now we have video evidence of you trespassing and damaging property to create false violations. This is not political. This is about protecting our residents from abuse." The Vice President, James Williams, spoke up. "I move that we immediately suspend Karen Blackwood from her position as treasurer, pending a full investigation into these allegations." "Second," said Michelle Torres, the secretary, without hesitation. "This is illegal," Karen shouted. "You cannot remove an elected board member without a vote from the full homeowners." "We are not removing you," Barbara clarified. "We are temporarily suspending you while we investigate. That is within the board's authority according to our bylaws. All in favor?" 4 hands went up. Only Karen's stayed down. The motion passes 4-1. "Karen, you are suspended from your duties as treasurer effective immediately. You are required to turn over all HOA financial records, files, and property within 48 hours. You are also prohibited from issuing any violation notices or having any official contact with residents regarding HOA business until this investigation is complete." Karen's face went from red to almost purple. Her hands shook as she gathered her papers. "You have no idea what you have done," she said, her voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "I built this community. I maintained the standards when everyone else wanted to let everything fall apart. And you are going to regret this, all of you." She looked directly at me, and the hatred in her eyes made my blood run cold. "Especially you, Mr. Webb. You should have just paid your fines and kept your head down. You should have learned your place." "Are you threatening a resident?" Barbara asked sharply. "I am stating facts," Karen replied coldly. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. The door slammed behind her with a bang that echoed through the room. For a moment, nobody moved or spoke. Then Robert started clapping. Slowly, others joined in. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding. Barbara raised her hands for quiet. "This is not over yet. We need to conduct a full audit of the HOA finances. Karen has been treasurer for 12 years, and we need to verify that all funds have been properly managed. I am asking for volunteers to form an audit committee." At least 10 hands shot up immediately. The meeting continued for another hour as they discussed next steps, timeline for the investigation, and interim financial management. Several residents shared more stories about Karen's harassment over the years. The picture that emerged was disturbing, a pattern of systematic abuse going back over a decade. After the meeting, multiple neighbors approached me to shake my hand and thank me. An older woman with gray curls hugged me tightly. "My husband and I almost moved away 5 years ago because of her," she said, tears in her eyes. "She made our lives miserable. Thank you for being brave enough to fight back." Robert and Barbara invited me to their house for lunch. We sat in their backyard, finally relaxing for the first time in weeks. "You did well in there," Robert said, grilling burgers on their patio, staying calm when she tried to provoke you. "That was important." "I was terrified," I admitted. "That look she gave me at the end, that was pure hatred." "Karen is dangerous when cornered," Barbara said seriously. "We need to be prepared for retaliation. She cannot issue official violations anymore, but that does not mean she will not try other things." "Like what?" Barbara and Robert exchanged a meaningful glance. "When Donald was finally voted out as president," Robert explained, "he slashed tires on 3 different cars belonging to board members who opposed him. It took weeks to prove it was him." My stomach dropped. "You think Karen would do something like that?" "I think Karen is capable of a lot of things when she feels backed into a corner," Barbara said quietly. "Just be careful, Marcus. Keep your cameras running. Lock your doors and windows, and if anything suspicious happens, call the police immediately. Do not hesitate." I drove home that afternoon feeling a strange mixture of victory and dread. We had won a major battle, but the war was far from over. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something immediately wrong. My mailbox door was hanging open, bent at an odd angle. I parked and walked over to examine it. Someone had taken a hammer or crowbar to it. The metal was dented and twisted. My mail was scattered on the ground, so it, and on top of the pile was a handwritten note on expensive stationery. "You made a mistake. This is just the beginning." The handwriting was elegant and precise. I did not need to guess who wrote it. I looked down the street toward Karen's house. Her Mercedes was parked in the driveway. As I watched, her front door opened slightly, and I saw a figure in the shadows, watching me. Then the door closed. I pulled out my phone and called Barbara. "She is not going to stop, is she?" "No," Barbara said quietly. "She is not, but neither are we. Have you ever dealt with someone who would not accept defeat? What would you do in Marcus's situation? Share your thoughts below." The police officer examined my destroyed mailbox carefully under the bright morning sun, taking detailed photos from multiple angles with his official department camera. Officer Rodriguez had responded to my emergency call within 20 minutes of me dialing 9, and he took the vandalism report very seriously, treating it as part of a larger harassment pattern. You said you have security camera footage of someone watching your house right after this damage occurred? He asked, flipping through his official notepad with practiced efficiency and professional focus. I pulled out my phone and showed him the saved video from the previous evening. Karen, standing in her doorway in the shadows, staring directly at my house for several long minutes, right after I had discovered the mailbox damage. The timestamp was clear and undeniable, showing it was recorded at 11:53 p.m. Officer Rodriguez watched the video twice, taking notes carefully. That is not quite enough for criminal charges by itself. He admitted honestly, his expression serious. But when I combine it with the trespassing footage you showed me earlier, the planted dead flowers, the pattern of harassment you have documented over weeks, and this physical vandalism of your property, I can definitely pay her an official visit and document everything in a formal police report. Sometimes an official police visit wearing a uniform is enough to make people think twice about continuing their threatening actions. He asked me dozens of detailed questions. How long had the harassment been going on? Had I felt physically threatened at any point? Had Karen made any direct verbal threats? Did I have documentation of everything? I showed him my thick folder of violation notices, photos, timestamps, and the comprehensive timeline I had created. This is excellent documentation, Officer Rodriguez said approvingly. Most people do not keep records this detailed. This will be very helpful if charges are eventually filed. 20 minutes later, I watched from my living room window as the police cruiser pulled up in front of Karen's house. Officer Rodriguez spent nearly 30 minutes inside. When he emerged, Karen followed him onto her porch, her face pale and drawn, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. Barbara called me an hour later with absolutely shocking news that changed everything. Karen just submitted her formal resignation letter from the board this morning. Effective immediately. No explanation given. And get this, she is also putting her house on the market next week. I just saw the real estate sign go up in her yard. She is actually leaving the community. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Running away is a much more accurate description, Barbara said, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. The police visit scared her very badly. Officer Rodriguez told her that criminal charges were being considered. And Marcus, I have even more important news. We just finished the preliminary financial audit this morning with a forensic accountant. You need to sit down for this. I sat down at my kitchen table, my heart pounding. Karen and Donald embezzled over $85,000 from HOA reserve funds over the past 8 years. $85,000. Marcus, we found everything. My stomach dropped and I felt physically sick. 85,000. How is that even possible? Barbara's voice was grim but determined. They created an entire system of fake vendor invoices for landscaping and maintenance work that was never actually performed. They set up relationships with real companies, got their letterhead and invoice formats, and then created fraudulent bills for services that never happened. The money was deposited into a separate bank account that only they controlled. The forensic accountant found bank statements going back 7 years, forged signatures on contracts, completely fake work orders. The entire criminal operation documented in detail. We are turning all the evidence over to the Police Detective Division and the District Attorney's Office this afternoon. Will they face charges? Almost certainly. This is fraud, embezzlement, and theft. Both of them could face serious jail time. Donald already has a lawyer. Karen will need one too. Over the next 3 weeks, everything moved incredibly fast. Karen's house sold in just 9 days to a young couple with twin babies. Karen herself seemed to vanish overnight. Her Mercedes disappeared from the driveway, and moving trucks came and went quickly. The police investigation expanded rapidly. Detectives interviewed dozens of residents about the financial irregularities and harassment patterns. The local newspaper ran a front-page story. HOA officials accused of embezzling thousands in elaborate fraud scheme. The article included quotes from Barbara and several victimized residents, along with a detailed timeline of the corruption. Donald Morrison was arrested first, on a Tuesday morning. His mugshot appeared on the evening news. He looked old and defeated. Nothing like the powerful HOA president who had terrorized residents for years. Karen was arrested 3 days later at a hotel 40 miles away where she had been hiding. The charges against her were extensive. embezzlement, fraud, criminal trespassing, vandalism, and filing false police reports. The bail was set at $50,000. Barbara organized a special community meeting to discuss the situation and vote on important reforms. Nearly every homeowner in Riverside Meadows attended. The community center was so packed that people stood along the walls and sat on the floor. "We have an opportunity to rebuild this community the right way," Barbara announced from the front of the room, her voice strong and clear. "The corruption is exposed. The people responsible are facing justice. Now we need to make sure this never happens again." The reforms passed unanimously. New financial oversight procedures. Term limits for board members. Mandatory audits every single year. A clear, simplified violation process that required photographic evidence and specific rule citations. An appeal process that protected homeowners from frivolous complaints. Most importantly, they eliminated over 60% of the made-up rules that Karen and Donald had created over the years. The governing documents were reduced from 78 pages down to 29 pages of reasonable, enforceable rules. "This is what an HOA should be," Barbara said, as residents applauded. A group of neighbors working together to maintain property values and community standards, not a dictatorship designed to control and intimidate people. After the meeting, dozens of residents approached me to express their gratitude. The elderly woman who had hugged me before hugged me again, crying happy tears. "You gave us our community back," she said. "You stood up when the rest of us were too afraid." "I had help," I told her, nodding toward Barbara. "A lot of help." Robert threw a massive neighborhood barbecue the following Saturday to celebrate the changes. It seemed like half the community showed up. Kids played in the yard, while adults stood around grilling burgers and sharing stories. For the first time since I moved in, Riverside Meadows actually felt like a real community. Tom Patterson, my home's previous owner, even drove in from his new place 2 hours away. He was a tall man in his 50s, with gray hair and tired eyes that brightened when he saw my house again. "I cannot believe what you did," Tom said emotionally, shaking my hand firmly. "I lived in fear of that woman for 4 years. She made my life absolutely miserable, every single day. I lost thousands of dollars in fines and legal fees fighting her. Eventually, I just gave up and sold at a loss to escape." "I am genuinely sorry you went through all of that," I said sincerely. "Don't be sorry. You finished what I could not. You exposed them completely. You saved this neighborhood." Tom looked at my house with obvious emotion. "I loved that house so much. I just could not stay any longer. But knowing that Karen is gone, that she is facing real prison time, that gives me closure I honestly never thought I would have." We talked for over an hour sitting in lawn chairs. Tom shared detailed stories about the harassment he had endured. Some were almost identical to what I had experienced. Others were worse. Karen had reported him to code enforcement multiple times, with false complaints. She had spread vicious rumors about him to neighbors. She had even tried to get him fired by calling his employer with false accusations about his character. She was obsessed with control, Tom explained, and when people did not submit to her control, she destroyed them. Or she tried to. "You are the first person who actually beat her at her own game." The criminal trial began 4 months later in the county courthouse. I attended several full days of testimony, sitting in the public gallery with Barbara and at least 20 other residents from Riverside Meadows who wanted to see justice served. The prosecution presented absolutely overwhelming and damning evidence. Bank records showing the embezzled funds being transferred systematically. Testimony from multiple legitimate contractors who confirmed under oath that they had never performed the work listed on fake invoices with their company names. Written statements from dozens of residents about years of harassment and intimidation tactics. The lead prosecutor, a sharp woman in her 40s named Jennifer Chun, methodically built the case piece by piece. She showed the jury photocopies of fake invoices totaling $8,000 to $5,000. She presented bank statements showing deposits into the secret account. She called expert witnesses who testified about standard HOA financial procedures and how Karen and Donald had violated every single rule. Karen's defense lawyer, an expensive attorney from the city, tried desperately to argue that Karen was simply following Donald's orders as president, that she did not know the financial arrangements were illegal, that she was a victim herself. But the prosecution's evidence completely destroyed that defense. They showed the jury documents that Karen had personally signed, checks she had personally deposited into the secret bank account, emails she had sent discussing how to hide the money from the other board members. She had actively and knowingly participated in the criminal scheme for over 8 years. Donald Morrison had already pleaded guilty to all charges 3 weeks before the trial began, and he agreed to testify against Karen in exchange for a reduced sentence recommendation from the prosecutor. His testimony was absolutely devastating and damning. He described in precise detail how they had created the embezzlement system together, how they had hidden the money in an offshore account initially, before moving it to a local bank, how they had used fear and systematic intimidation to prevent anyone from questioning their authority, or looking at the financial records closely. He admitted everything, and he implicated Karen in every aspect of the fraud. Karen was found guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay full restitution of $85,000 plus interest and legal fees. Donald received 3 years in prison for his cooperation and guilty plea. As they led Karen out of the courtroom in handcuffs, she looked directly at me one final time, but the hatred in her eyes was gone. She just looked broken and empty. 6 months after Karen's arrest, Barbara ran for re-election as HOA president. She won with 83 votes out of 87 total homeowners. It was the largest margin of victory in Riverside Meadows history. At the celebration party Barbara hosted at the community center, she pulled me aside for a private conversation in the hallway. "I want to thank you properly," she said. "When you moved in, I honestly did not know if we could change things. Karen and Donald had controlled this community for so long. People were scared. But you were not scared. Or maybe you were scared, but you fought anyway. And that inspired everyone else to fight too. I just wanted to live in my house without being harassed," I said with a smile. "You did more than that. You exposed corruption. You stood up to a bully. You helped us reclaim our community. That matters, Marcus. That really matters." We rejoined the party. Robert was telling stories and making people laugh. Kids were playing games in the corner. Neighbors who had barely spoken to each other before were now chatting like old friends. 1 year after I bought my house, I stood on my front porch on a quiet Sunday morning, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. My lawn was healthy and perfectly maintained because I wanted it that way, not because someone was threatening me with fines. My mailbox had been replaced with a nice new one. My security cameras were still running, but now they just captured footage of neighbors walking their dogs and kids riding bikes. The orange flags were long gone. The violation notices had stopped. The fear had evaporated. Riverside Meadows had transformed from a community ruled by fear into an actual neighborhood where people looked out for each other. Property values had increased 17% since the reforms passed. New families were moving in regularly. The community had a waiting list of people who wanted to buy here. Barbara had been right about everything. Karen and Donald had poisoned the community for years. But communities can heal when good people stand together. Tom Pedersen called me that afternoon. "I heard property values are way up in Riverside Meadows. That house is probably worth $50,000 more than what you paid now." "Probably," I agreed. "So you made a good investment after all." Despite everything, I looked at my house, my yard, my neighborhood. I thought about the friends I had made, the community we had built together, the justice we had achieved. "Yeah," I said. Despite everything, it turned out to be the best decision I ever made. 6 months later, Barbara nominated me for an open seat on the HOA board. Primera accepted. Not because I wanted power or control, but because I wanted to help protect what we had built. I wanted to make sure that what happened with Karen and Donald could never happen again. At my first official board meeting as a member, I sat at the same table where Karen had once sat and terrorized residents. But now the table represented something completely different. Service, community, protection. Barbara smiled at me from the president's chair. Welcome to the board, Marcus. Ready to help run this HOA the right way? Absolutely, I said. And I meant it, because this was not just about rules and regulations anymore. This was about neighbors helping neighbors. This was about standing up for what was right. This was about proving that communities thrive when good people refuse to stay silent. Riverside Meadows was home now, not just a house, but a real home. And it always would be. Have you ever stood up against injustice in your community? Share your victory stories below. Sometimes one person really can make a difference.